Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And we've just been to see Juror number 2. It's had a really limited release in the US.
It's been dumped.
Yeah, completely. Like, Warner Brothers wanted to put it on Max, like they kind of do with everything, their HBO Max service. Matt Zoller Seitz on Twitter has been very, very outspoken about this. He's been complaining. He's basically saying that they ended up doing a limited release of like 50 screens across the whole US, whereas it's open in like 300 screens in the UK. And he was saying in, I think, Dublin, it's open at 8 alone in Dublin, you know, compared to 50 in the whole US. So it's been really kind of insultingly dumped. And it's a Clint Eastwood drama, and people turn out for Clint Eastwood films like massively. Like the kind of the Grey Pound, quote unquote,
yes,
hugely goes for Clint Eastwood. People get off buses to go and see him. You know,
mind you, the British release has been overstated because here in Birmingham it's playing at Cineworld at 11:40 in the morning, and that's the only screening.
Yes, that's also true. So it's like it's wide, but it's also limited in terms of the number of the screenings that we're getting. That's true. The trailer was one of the most compelling things that I'd ever seen because I could not believe that I hadn't seen this idea before. The idea seemed so obvious, and I couldn't believe that I hadn't seen it.
Melodramatic.
Right. The idea is you're on a jury, and the guy whose guilt you're there to assess, you know didn't do it because what he's being accused of, you know you did.
Yes.
If you have the power to send someone else down for what you did or to get him off, what do you do, right? And all these things immediately come into play. And I was kind of thinking, why have I never seen this idea played out?
I know, it's a great concept, really.
It must have been like, it feels like it must have been like an Alfred Hitchcock Presents or a Play for Today or something like that.
I mean, I'm sure it's been done before.
It has to have been, but I can't think of when it has been. Anyway, just an unbelievably compelling trailer. I could not wait to see this. So we have. And what do you make of it?
I loved it, really. So it's one of those films that I loved. I thought the ending was phenomenal. By the way, I think we are going to have spoilers ahead.
Spoilers are going through the whole...
Because it's very difficult to talk about the film in a kind of... with any depth.
The film is all about the information that comes out, secrets people hold, all that kind of thing, and there's no way of not talking about those things.
That's right.
So, spoilers coming up.
So, I loved the ending. I loved the presentation of the information to the audience. I thought some of it was a bit cliched, and you've seen it before in like 12 Angry Men and things like that.
It's a huge reference point, 12 Angry Men.
And the makeup of the jurors, you can see they're all types, and of course in a way they all need to be, and you know. But I must say, I found it constantly interesting. It did grip me. I was very curious to see how it would develop and how it would end, right? You know, I was thinking of all the variations that there could be in the ending. So that was, you know, quite gripping. And I also loved the look of the film, right? So, you know, yesterday we were talking about Venom and how it looked washed out and not
we were talking
lit
about lighting, and I was decrying the state of lighting.
Yeah.
And now, since seeing Venom, I think we've seen two films that go against what I said, because this and Heretic Yesterday are both very nicely lit.
Yeah. This one is very particularly, I think, beautifully lit, so that, you know, kind of you see the blue in Nicholas Hoult's eyes, and you know the flesh has depth and texture, and you know
there are ideas with the lighting as well. Yeah, and as you say, some of it is not the most original. That there's a lot of this film that you feel like is a reconfiguration of the kind of ideas you've seen before in some ways, and it's things like sitting on your own in your living room with the moonlight coming through the blinds, you know, playing on your face.
You know, and it creates a feeling, you know, and the actors are part of that. And Clint Eastwood and his cinematographer, who I want to look up, give me a second, because I think he might be Québécois. I think it's Yves Bélanger or something like that.
Yes, Yves Bélanger. He's worked with Xavier Dolan, Alain Desrochers.
Right,
Desrochers,
okay.
And
so he's a Québécois.
Jean-Marc Vallée.
Yeah, so all the great Québécois filmmakers. And he does a beautiful job here, you know, and I wanted to signal it because it is the opposite of what we were saying a few days ago, and it serves the film beautifully. And I kind of want to make a point of it because, you know, it seems to me that Clint Eastwood, as a filmmaker, Yeah, for me, his weakness is that he never, or I can't remember, and I think I've seen a lot of his films. I mean, not all because he's directed so many, but quite over half, right? And I don't think there's a single kind of memorable image that stays with me in any of his films. Yeah, he's always
anything from Unforgiven. There are at least one or two.
I remember scenes. I remember dialogue. I remember Gene Hackman. Yeah, the slashing of the prostitutes. I mean, I remember moments from the film, but I don't remember images.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. I'm not. I mean, obviously he's a director, so he must think in images to a degree. Yeah, but I'm not sure that that's his strong suit. You know.
Yeah.
But he's kind of wonderful at audiovisual storytelling. Yeah, at kind of, at pointing you to the thing to see. I was really kind of impressed with the wide angles in all the courtroom scenes. Yeah, he's not afraid of letting things air. Yeah, and then kind of drawing your attention to particular things. Yeah, so I kind of, I liked all of that very much.
He's very good, I think, in those courtroom scenes at building triangles between the prosecutor or the defender's attorney questioning, and the witness answering, and Nicholas Hoult's character, the main character who has done this thing, who's wondering what he's going to do and everything, and of course the two talking to each other don't know anything about him. They don't know that he's important, but all our focus is drawn to him in the middle of this triangle. You see that setup, that staging quite a few times.
I mean, I was so impressed with Nicholas Hoult and Gabriel Basso. Yeah, Gabriel Basso has been, is it The Night Manager or something like that on Netflix? And, I thought he was wonderful in that night. I love that series.
The Night Agent.
The Night Agent.
Right.
I loved him in that.
He plays the defendant.
And he plays the defendant. And he's got this very interesting look because it's a combination of rough looking, but he's got like Bambi eyes, kind of, So he's got all the tattoos and so on. And he looks like a hard guy, but he looks like a hard guy with feelings. Which is exactly right, isn't it? For this role?
And when he gives his evidence, you feel them come out, and it feels very, very real. That, I couldn't have killed my girlfriend. I love her too much, and it's just a mistake. And what we understand. It's because of the way that all the information is parceled out over time. What we understand is that he and his girlfriend had this fight at this bar, and she walked home. He left her to walk home, and purely by coincidence, the Nicholas Hoult character, who was also at that bar, was driving home in pouring rain, pitch black darkness, hit something. He thought it was a deer. There was no sign of the body, whatever it was. And it's only when this case comes up he realises it was no deer. So yeah, and that scene where he's giving his evidence, the defendant, and you're right. It really undercuts that look, and shows you that kind of gives you access to a kind of fragility that you wouldn't necessarily expect from someone who looks that way or lives that kind of life. Because we're also told about kind of previous convictions and that sort of thing, but it undercuts it and feels very, very real. Like it doesn't. It could feel like it could feel kind of phony, right? It could feel like it could feel very mechanical. We've set up a guy to look and sound and feel just like this, and we're going to try and undercut it, and it would not work. It really works, right? You believe everyone in this.
I had and I have certain reservations about the film, kind of, I suppose, on political grounds, because the whole beginning seems to me to be an anti-feminist setup. Yeah, it's like, oh yes, all the women, he's violent, he's abusive, he's this, he's guilty, right? Yeah, and the whole film is about disproving that, right? So it does have a kind of an anti-woke dimension.
Maybe, yeah. It's certainly going very specifically like we have to listen to every bit of evidence in this. We can't just make the assumptions that we want to make.
And in that sense, obviously, you know, the film won me over.
I do know what you mean.
But initially, I thought it really is kind of setting up all these women to be wrong, right? Which, you know, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth, because imagine if that setup had been around race, yeah, rather than kind of gender, and if all these black men were then proven to be wrong and prejudiced,
Yeah.
it kind of doesn't feel right, really.
I do know what you mean. Because it does seem like, you get those early jury scenes where everyone immediately says, yeah, he's guilty, yeah, turn him down. And
he called her a bitch.
and there is something kind of, there does feel something specifically gendered about most of the women, or maybe just some of the women who say he's guilty and this is why. Whereas the men, they don't have that. They just, I mean, they want to get home. This is the other thing. I think this is a real kind of Clint Eastwood thing, right? Because he's a lifelong conservative and he's like 93 now. And
so his conservatism is hard left in relation to MAGA, really.
But didn't he appear on stage some years ago for Trump or at the RNC?
Yeah, he did, and he made an ass of himself,
talking to a chair.
Yeah.
So and people going, God, he's losing it. But there is something I've associated with this film. I was going to say recently, maybe it goes back a very long way, which is a kind of distrust of the system, sort of thing.
Yes.
Because that's what a lot of this comes down to is the system. There's a huge amount of irony when they're doing jury selection, and the judge says, none of you want to be here, and I get that. But that makes you the perfect people to be here, because you're not invested, you're not biased, this, that, and the other, right? There's so much irony, I feel, layered into that, because I don't know about you, but the first thing I was thinking when she said that was, no, what it means is that they're all invested in trying to make a quick decision and get home as soon as possible. And when you get into the jury room, that's all they're saying is, I need to get home to my kids. I'm sick and tired of being here. And when Nicholas Hoult is the one holdout, which is a very 12 Angry Men thing, the one guy who says, no, we need to talk about this. It's the one woman in particular, the black woman, there's two black people on jury, one man and one woman. And she's the one who immediately is sick and tired of the fact that she's going to have to stay here for longer because he's making her wait.
Yes.
I mean, I did feel, it's funny you mentioned race, because I felt there was a real racial component, at least early on, to those two characters and the way they were behaving within the jury, and the way they responded to Nicholas Holt's character.
There is, and in a way that, frankly, is a bit, I was going to say unbelievable. It's not quite unbelievable, but it lacks credibility, let's say, right? Because you would think that black people would be so much more conscious of constant miscarriages of justice, of deliberate miscarriages of justice. That they'd want to give the person on trial every chance possible, because they would know better than almost anybody how often kind of the law could work against you, right? And instead, they're the ones who are kind of most insistent on guilty verdicts, right?
Yeah, and I think
and if you're doing that, it would have been more interesting than to actually racialize it, like "fuck you, white boy," right? Like,
but that is kind of part of the basis of that, right? Well, it's "fuck you, white boy" to the defendant, not to Nicholas Hoult. I mean, they definitely, certainly the man, and then later on we learn that he notices his gang tattoo, and this man, his brother, I think, was in this gang and died, and he has a very personal relationship with the gang that this defendant has been associated with, but I think there's very much a component of this kind of hillbilly hick type
prejudice. Yeah,
it feels like that, right?
There is for sure.
But the thing about the kind of distrust of the system, because this is what we are basically set up, at least early on, to I think believe in the system, even though there is that irony I mentioned. The system is here to see justice, and that's what we're meant to believe in. And the character who really speaks to an undercutting of that is the DA, or she's going for DA, and then she becomes DA when she wins.
Toni Collette, yeah.
Toni Collette character who's prosecuting, because she is the one who starts to believe that this might be a miscarriage of justice and we've got it all wrong. And there's this thing about doing your own investigation. Again, there's a 12 Angry Men connection, because that happens in 12 Angry Men, bringing the knife in, and you're not supposed to do that. Here, I mean, the thing in 12 Angry Men was he brought his own knife in and said, I could buy this, and then nothing was made of it. Whereas here, the J.K. Simmons character goes off and does his own research and is dismissed from the jury for it, right? Like, there's a consequence for that here. The film understands. And obviously she is going off, and which on the basis of that information, she goes off and starts doing her own investigation. And by the time the film concludes, we've got a miscarriage of justice, The guy has been sent down for this. He's got the guilty verdict. Nicholas Hoult has capitulated. But she knows well and true that this wasn't justice being served, and even though she benefited from it, is justice more important? And I think there's a really interesting thing going on, which is that family is constantly being mentioned. Right? I need to get home to my kids. I've got a baby on the way, and there is a feeling, like in modern society, I think, that anything is permissible if you can justify it by "I've got a family."
Oh my God! Yes, it is.
I'll kill anyone to save my kids.
I know.
And that, I think, is really interesting that it's being critiqued here by someone who is, like I said, this lifelong conservative. Because I don't think you ever see that critiqued, ever. And it's so interesting to see that here. Because essentially what we're getting from the Nicholas Hoult character, when we learn that he's, as I say, capitulated and given his guilty verdict that he knows is wrong, he's done it because I have a family and I can get over this. And all I wanted was for that guy to be a good guy, ultimately. Like when you see that flashback of him in the bar, and we've had this thing about him being a recovering alcoholic, and he said, I was at the bar that night and I ordered a drink, but I didn't drink it. And I never questioned that. And then when we see the flashback, and you see the drink in front of him, I'm going, oh no, don't have been lying about this. I need you not to have been lying about this, because I believe in you, man. Yeah. But ultimately, what we get is that as much as he wants to be a good guy, and he says to the DA at the end, I'm a good person, we know that he's not, because he's been able to send this guy to prison for life.
With no parole.
With no parole, knowing that it's wrong, and go home to his wife and his new baby, and not think about it.
I know. Well, I think the interesting thing is that what you see in the film, and I think this is what's original, or to me so intriguing about it anyway, is that you see the makings of a bad man. Because, when he arrives at the courtroom, and this is so clever in the script, he has no idea. Yeah, I mean, basically, for all this time, he thought he'd killed a deer, and he couldn't see anything, and he just went home, right? So it wasn't even a hit and run. I mean, he wasn't conscious that he'd hit a person, right? And he did stop, and he did check, and he just couldn't see it. So until that point, he really is an innocent man. I mean, he was a participant in an unfortunate accident that he wasn't even fully aware of, right? But then once he realizes, it becomes a moral dilemma. Exactly, what does he do? And by the end of the film, he actually has become a bad man. He sent an innocent person to jail for life so that he could enjoy his life with his family.
And there's one scene that I think was missing, which I would love to have seen, which is the scene where he changes his vote. Because the whole film we've been seeing him, making sure that the jury questions it and not wanting to send this guy down because he knows it's wrong to, even though obviously he's not saying that to the jury, but he knows it's wrong to, and he's trying to draw this out and change their minds. And then we see the guilty verdict being read out in court, and he's not there for it. And I think you really need to have seen that scene, like the way in which the information is then delivered, as to the context around him delivering that verdict, I think is dissatisfying. I think I needed to see it happen.
I think you're right. I just assumed that was the day the baby was born, because
it certainly was.
His chair is just shown as being empty.
Yeah, and then the next time we see him, the next scene is him in hospital with his wife with the new baby. So that's obviously what's happened. But he does, so is that it that he needed to have given his vote, though. He needed to
have given it. You needed to have seen that moment of transition. You're right.
I think you do. I really felt the lack of it. And I also think there's it's almost like half a scene I felt was kind of missing, which is when, right at the end, the new DA, the prosecutor, Tony Collette's character, sits next to him on the bench. Because what we know at that point is we know that he knows she's visited the house. And obviously we know that she has worked out, because we've just had the moment of realisation. We've had a bit of a cinematic sort of, a flashback in her head of, moments of, just like at the end of Usual Suspects, sort of all the memories playing back. So we know that kind of they know these things about each other, but they haven't actually spoken about it yet. And I felt like it needed to just be maybe played slightly differently, that there needs to be more of a sense of shock from Nicholas Holt's character that he has been found out that this has been deduced. I felt it was lacking there. That scene almost plays as though they all already know this already. Somehow.
Yeah. I mean...
It's only a kind of slight tonal thing, really.
Well, I don't know, because that should have been a moment, a big moment, for the audience and for the characters.
You felt
and it was really underplayed. I think it was almost thrown away, really.
Yeah, so I think I think I should be more forceful about disliking that, because I think it was lacking.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of, to an extent, I think the trailer is much more dramatic than the film is. You know, like I really thought this was going to be like constantly kind of the moral dilemma was just going to be huge and constantly playing out in my head, and it's not. It's a quiet drama. It plays out very gently and slowly. It's kind of gently compelling, if you like. But it doesn't play for big dramatic moments so much. Maybe the biggest is where Nicholas Hoult cries because his wife has been visited.
He's
by
so wonderful in that.
It's like that's the scene where I thought for the first time in my life, oh, I do really like this guy. I spent a long time finding him quite annoying. Maybe because I first saw him in About a Boy where he was 13 and he was an annoying little kid and I just didn't like him much in that. And maybe that coloured like my whole view of this guy. And also he's in Skins, which I wasn't a huge fan of. But here, I mean, that scene in particular completely won me round.
Yeah, he's wonderful.
He's amazing. He's amazing throughout. He's so transparent. So much of this film is just based on him
his eyes, really.
Taking in information.
Yeah.
He's constantly listening to, like, the first half of the film, particularly, listening to all the evidence and everything, is him in a constant state of learning what the situation that he's in is and what the past actually was and so on and so forth. And you can see it written on his face. I'm learning all this, and what am I going to do with this? It's a really, really, really remarkable performance.
Yes. Yes, I hope it's seen, actually. Because it's definitely a role in a performance that should catapult his career into a different level if it's seen, really.
Although his career is already at a very high level. I mean, I think he is.
He's never carried a film.
Maybe so. Yeah. Maybe. Yeah.
So, and he's exactly that age. I mean, if he's not going to be like, a leading mass star who something is built around now, then. It kind of becomes rarer and rarer. And he's very charismatic and he's very good, which is a very rare combination. I thought the film was very interesting because it was a real lovely surprise to see J.K. Simmons and Kiefer Sutherland.
J.K. Simmons, yeah.
And I wish Clint Eastwood had dotted the jury with stars.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Because that would have fleshed out. It would have fleshed out the writing, right? Because the writing of those characters, I think, is quite stereotypical, and kind of in a way it has to be because they get like 3 lines or something, right? The jurors, right? So kind of this is a moment where kind of casting former stars or people with a star persona could really flesh out and add texture and drama to to the scenes. So I was it was a shame that kind of there wasn't more of that star casting throughout. And I'm sure he could have gotten. I'm sure people, like with Woody Allen, people are very eager to work with Clint Eastwood. So I felt that was a little bit like a missed opportunity. But that said, I really, really enjoyed it, and the ending was terrific, right?
You mean the very, very last scene?
The very, very last
shot,
scene.
Almost?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think kind of, you see, this is the thing about Clint Eastwood, because in a way, like, he is conservative, and he does believe in certain things, and however much he critiques the American social system, justice system, he basically... or at least the film has faith in it.
Well, it has faith in people. I think it lacks the faith in the institution. It says you have to go outside the institution.
But
I mean, ultimately, what we get at the end,
institution is its people.
Yes.
Kind of. There's no throwing away of the badge here, as in Dirty Harry. Or, I mean, the DA comes through, right?
Although there is, well, yes. So the ending of the film, we should just say. I mean, if you got this far, you must have seen it. But it's that Nicholas Hoult having delivered the verdict and the defendant having gone down for life, settles in to his life with his wife and his new baby, and they're going to be very happy together. And he gets a knock on the door, and it's the DA, Toni Collette. She's there, and they just look at each other because he knows he has not got away with this. She is going to pursue this. Yeah. But the bit of context we have just before that is her in her new office, having won her election, being congratulated by the public defender, Chris Messina, who she knows very well. I really like Chris Messina, by the way.
Yes, I like him as well.
And he says, like, if you pursue this, you'll be a laughingstock. And I don't remember the dialogue exactly. To me, the implication seemed pretty clear that you'll be throwing away this job if you do this. Yeah. Like getting this conviction got you this job. We knew that from the start. She was pursuing. She had to get the conviction. It was going to win her this election.
Sure.
You'll be throwing that away if you pursue this.
Sure.
So that,
But, so therefore, she's decided to throw it away. It's a belief in the system. The law will come through. Like, the implication is... And actually, it's a very good way of ending, because the implication is that Nicholas Hoult will pay for it, but hopefully not too much. Yeah, because after all, he is innocent, really. Yeah, the reason why the film is so interesting is because it's quite murky, right? Like, kind of, Kiefer Sutherland tells them, you'll never get away with it, right? Even though you're innocent, right? Even though it was like an accident, right?
Yeah.
And no one will believe you. You're an alcoholic, blah 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 blah. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, there is a critique of people's prejudices and what's brought to bear on the decision-making process. But I think there is also an ultimate kind of upholding, of the justice system. The film ends with justice on the way to being done. Mm. Yeah. So I found that interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I do know what you mean. I still think it's very heavily based on the individual decision.
Well, sure.
She has to make that decision to do this, and she will be throwing things away by doing it. If justice was truly to be done, she should be able to survive that.
But you get the feeling that she is sacrificing those things to do the right thing.
She is, absolutely. Yeah. But like I say, to me that reads as very much an individual decision rather than ultimately faith in the system.
But she is the DA, and actually, kind of what you see is that the system, with all its flaws, is also peopled by good people. Mm-hmm. The judge, the jury head, who's kind of constantly trying to do the right. So obviously, kind of, people are involved in their own lives and they want to leave early and blah 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 blah. Yeah, but ultimately, you see that kind of, people are really trying to do the right thing.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So, which to me is interesting in the light of Clint Eastwood's kind of conservatism, which is, kind of a traditional conservatism would include a real mistrust of the institutions, and a real critique of them. But in this film, it seems to me that critique is also bounded by an ultimate faith in the system.
I mean, it feels like a healthy distrust here. Whereas, I mean, for me, the other big reference point when I'm thinking about Clint Eastwood and the system, the institutions, is Sully, which was about Sully Sullenberger, who piloted that plane that got hit by bird strikes and had to land in the Hudson River in New York. And that was that was an amazing thing when it happened. It was kind of the anti 9/11, right? Like, this guy saved New York from a plane strike. Yeah. That's really what it was. And that film is about the aftermath of that and finding out what was the cause of this. And it's about I think it was the NTSB, which is the Transport Security Board, basically trying to get Sully for negligence. And it has courtroom scenes, and he ultimately prevails. And it's no, I did everything by the book. This was just a mistake. And the trouble is that I read a little bit about that case, and I was interested in it. And the NTSB is the most sort of upstanding body in the world, because airplane safety in particular is the most seriously taken of all things. Much more than cars, motorbikes, and the rest of it. It's super, super rigid. And when you read about the actual things in that case, it's they weren't trying to get Sully. They were just trying to understand what happened so we can prevent this from happening again. So I think, what can we put in place to and the film is just, it's so interested, it's so keen on the system persecuting the man that it throws away the truth completely. I had a real problem with that.
Right.
Anyway, so I was wondering, would I see something like that here? And here, to me at least, it feels that the distrust of the system that's being shown is A, much more realistic, and B, much more healthy. It's kind of it's like it's distrusting in places where things should be distrusted. We know that eyewitness evidence is not to be trusted, which we see here. We know that incorrect convictions are given all the time, and people in America, because of the death penalty, people are put to death for them, and there's no coming back from that. So like it feels like this is the right place to be putting that distrust the way I see it.
Anyway, I thought it was kind of interesting because it's almost the kind of cinema that we don't get anymore.
Yeah, I was thinking
that. It's a film about serious issues dealt seriously in a complex manner. Yeah, that kind of lingers in the mind and gets you to mull over what you've seen. Yeah, I don't think it's a great film, but I think it's a really interesting film that I enjoyed very much, and it has absolutely wonderful performances, really.
And it's so great to see, the director knocking one out at 93 like this.
My God, yes.
I mean, and just the other day we saw Gladiator 2, which I think Ridley Scott's 83 or so.
Yeah. So it's got another 10 years to go.
And you kind of think, it's funny, when you think about, 30 years ago, Clint Eastwood did Unforgiven, where he was already, that was the film which was, summing up his career.
Yeah.
And he had 30 years since then.
I know.
You think, this is the age at which people are supposed to be doing their summing up my career films, and this is just another great drama that he's putting out.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. I really, really enjoyed it.
I really, really enjoyed it, though, I have all of the niggles that you've just heard, and whilst finding it very entertaining, I didn't quite find it great. But that said, kind of, it was very enjoyable and it's very good. So, I would recommend kind of people see it.
If you can at the cinema.
If it's anywhere near you.
Because of that relatively limited release and so on. Although, like I say, if you've listened this far in the podcast and haven't seen it, then sorry, we ruined it all.
Anyway, thank you all very much for listening. We're eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, and YouTube Music. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, and Blue Sky, eavesdropping.bsky.social, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.